So welcome everyone to another episode of the group chat brought to you by OVERMUGGED. I'm your host Darrell, and alongside me my co-host Xin Wei. Xin Wei, how have you been?
Good. How have you been?
I've been busy. We have many interesting things coming up for OVERMUGGED in April. But we'll update you guys when it happens. But more importantly, one of the major announcements that went out just last week, I think, or at least as the point of a recording in early March, MOE just announced the latest changes to A-levels. So recently I also did a YouTube video on it, but I think for today's podcast, I just wanted to keep it a little bit more opinionated, because in the YouTube video I was just like talking about what are the changes, but today I really want to take a deeper dive into what will actually happen with this new set of changes. So maybe Xin Wei, just to kickstart, do you mind sharing based on your best memory, what are some of the major updates to A-levels?
I know first thing is that the total score will be 70 instead of 90 because of a removal of a few like the H1 subjects. Yeah, so I think that's definitely one big one, and also removal of mid-year exam. Yeah, so I think these two are the main one.
Yeah, I mean, just to add more clarity to what Xin Wei was talking about. So the original rank point for A-levels out of 90 points. This is tabulated based on your 3 H2 subjects and your 3 H1 subjects. So by right, for students right now, they are taking 6 subjects in total. You can think of H2 as being twice as heavy a content workload than a H1. But with the new system, the rank point will drop from 90 to 70. Instead of 3 H1, now there's only 1 H1 left over. And that last H1 is your general paper, which translates to English, basically. All right. So with the new system in place, so if you're Sec 4 this year and you're going on to JC next year, the changes will affect you directly. And what will happen is that you technically have lesser things to worry about because lesser things will actually be graded for your A-levels. The 2 H1 subjects that are being removed, number 1 is project work, and the second being normal H1. That means that used to be a subject that you have to study for and you'll be graded, but now it's just removed. On top of that, there are also announcements of how mid-year exams will be removed as per the same changes that have occurred for both primary and secondary school. So we just wanted to spend today to take a deeper dive into how these changes will impact you and what does it mean for students who are entering JC, how things will be changing, whether the competitive landscape will be making adjustments and stuff. We just want to take a deeper dive into what we predict will likely happen. Maybe Xin Wei, we can start off with the easier one to kick it out of the way, which is H1 project work. Can you share with the viewers a little bit more about what that entails? For students currently not in JC, they might not have any idea what that is, and whether you think it's a good thing or not that it's being removed.
So, long story short, H1 project work requires students to work in groups and then to tackle like a project that is like a one-word title. So you based on that one-word title, you come up with things that you solutions to tackle that problem. And honestly, that took up quite a bit of my J1 time because so project work will be completed before during your JC1, so it won't really eat into JC2, and that also means that there's a very short period of time, right? And then so a lot of time in JC1 you're trying to complete all the requirements of project work. So I think making it okay, anyway, it's not removing it, it's making it pass fail. Yeah, so you still get that group work coming out with problems and solving parts sorry, but it's no longer graded. So I think personally, I think this move, I appreciate that. Like, I think good for whoever who will benefit from this change. I like this change.
I'm a big fan of this change as well because I've always had a personal opinion that JC is really tough in terms of the academic workload. I mean, of course, it's meant to be tough because it's meant to prepare you for university, but I found that there's just way too much to be done in that short span of 2 years. And I think by making project work pass fail now really helps to elevate some of those workload. Now, the truth I feel is that the moment you make it into a pass-fail subject, nobody's going to give a shit about it. I think that's just going to be the reality. It's still a subject that you need to take, but given that it's no longer graded, I think most people will not be as concerned and will not take project work as seriously. It just pretty much becomes like a regular project that you have to submit and stuff just to get that pass.
Just do minimally, right?
Yeah, just hit the bare minimum.
Yeah, at least there is still like some group work and discussion going on. Like you still can't, we did a PW podcast before, and we talked about like bad group mates. I think you still can't be that, because if you are too bad, your group mates may like report you to the teacher and you may just fail the subject, and you don't want that. I think that's very ugly right now. Like getting a B versus failing a subject. Like failing PW now will look extra ugly. So you still don't want to be that like bad teammate, but you just need to do bare minimum, and I think that's great. Like considering honestly, JC contents are just crazy.
Yeah, I think the bare minimum theory is good, and I think in a way it also allows students to be a bit more creative with their approach, because back then, as a graded subject with an actual syllabus and requirements, it is very, very structured. So you can't really veer off to go into a very creative direction to build a solution that you genuinely believed in. But the thing with now it being pass-fail, I think there's going to be a lot more leniency, and teachers are also going to take a step back to let students just explore. So you can actually spend a bit of more creativity and more flexibility when it comes to designing your project. I would still be of the opinion that project work, there are certain parts that I find it to be useful. I don't want to take that away from project work, but I just found that a lot of these soft skills are better learned in a normal setting, like in a CCA or in a club. So I never found that forcing you to work in a group is beneficial. But I think what could come off as a good thing to pick up would include some of the research skills that actually a lot of university courses will need, like how to do your citations, how to do a proper report. I think those are quite useful. On top of that, I think oral presentation is also one of those moments where you can actually practice on your public speaking skills. And I don't think that public speaking skills is like is a very good to have skill set for sure, right? You always do better in life with it than without it. So I do think that there's value in PW, but I'm super, super glad that it's now a pass-fail kind of thing. And I think the bad apples are gonna get worse, and there are gonna be more good apples that turn bad. But I'll take it and just give a general shout out to just do your bare minimum. Don't be a bad teammate. You don't have to be the best, I would say, because honestly, nobody's gonna really care much about it anymore. But you don't want to be the one pulling your group down. And I think if you can at least hit the bare minimum, just do your job, then I think that will be fine.
Yeah.
But I think overall, me and Xin Wei were just really happy that PW is out of the way. Now, on to discuss onto the next point. Now that PW is a pass-fail, most of us get that most likely, nobody's going to care about it. What about the next other H1 subject? So Xin Wei, can you maybe go into the current climate of the 3+1 contrasting, and what are some of the usual combinations for that extra H1?
So usually, it's been a long while. So you must correct me if I make any like factual wrong statement. So usually students either take 4H2 or 3H2 and 1H1, but ultimately out of this 4 subject, 3 will be counted as upon 20, and then another one will be counted as 10. But right now, they're just removing that 4th subject entirely. So it means that, I think I will just discuss like the direct repercussion. It just means that you will still need to take 4 subjects, but it does not matter your 4th subject grade at all. It used to matter. It used to matter, but maybe it can matter less, but it still impacts the total score. But right now, it has 0 impact because it only counts 3 out of 4. Yeah, it's a bit like your L1, R5 for O-level.
Yeah, maybe I can just come in here. So if we just go with the conventional, like I'm not talking about very specific subject combinations, but most students, if they enter the science stream, most likely they will take PCME or BCME, referring to physics, chem, math, econs, or biochem, math, econs. So that's the most common combination. And typically out of the 4 subjects, students will identify which is their weakest, most of the time I feel they would lean towards dropping it to H1 econs lah. I feel lah. Then so they enter all A levels with 3 H2s, being the 3 core sciences, plus that one contrasting subject, which is econs. So now we are taking away that H1 and it will no longer matter in your rank point. But there's a small caveat lah. So the system will still work in such a way that if your last H1 subject helps to improve your score, they will still count it. You get a very slight difference. So it's not that we are completely removing it, but you only account it if it overall helps to pull out your grade. Meaning maybe all of your H2s are doing really poorly and your H1 you get an A, the H1 will still help to slightly pull up the average score. Yeah. So that's what they mean by aggregated. But most likely what I would predict will happen is that people would largely just ignore the H1 completely and to focus more time on their H2s. What this also means is I could see a lot of students taking a very early and strategic approach. A lot of schools, they actually encourage students to start with 4H2 first and to try out first. And then along the way, maybe in J1 or end of J1, they then decide if they want to drop to from a H2 to a H1. So instead of 4H2, they will drop to 3H2 and 1H1. Now I see actually schools might pivot towards getting students to make that choice earlier to decide which H1 subject they would want to, drop down. And in a way, give the student more time to focus on their core 3H2 subjects. I could see that as a very likely path. But just as a warning to students who are aiming for top tier courses like medicine and law, it is very common for students that are aiming for these top courses to still continue taking 3H2s. And on top of that, they usually take H3s as well. So this is really to make yourself more outstanding above and beyond to stand you out from the crowd so that you actually qualify for these top courses. But if you're just like a commoner like me, and you're just looking to get past A level, I would say that the best approach would be to decide on your H1 as early as possible. Not saying that you completely throw that away because you don't want to fail it, but most of your effort will be just spent on focusing on your core H2 subjects. So any thoughts on that?
So I took 4H2 and I personally think that for students who can don't think so much. I feel like, okay, strategizing is of course good, right? It's only smart to strategize and plan. But I feel like for students, don't think so much first. Just go and try. And if really at that point you realize that, okay, I'm really struggling with this subject, then you need to start looking for options like, okay, I need to drop this to H1, or I just don't study this H1 at all because I need to focus on my 3 other H2s. But I will always encourage my students, like for the first maybe few months, first test, first 2 exams, just go and try their best to learn all subjects well.
I think my own personal experience, I also started with 4H2. I only dropped to a H1 in the around early part of J2. Because I realized that the content I was learning doesn't interest me. So I decided to drop my geography from H2 to H1. But that allowed me to take away the contents that I didn't enjoy studying. And I was able to do a lot better for my H1. I ended up getting an A for it. But I think if I start with a H2, it wouldn't have been possible. Now, for those of you who are still considering whether to take 3 H2s, there is a very strong upside here as well that you need to understand, which is that amongst your 4 H2s, assuming you go into A levels with 4 of them, and let's say hypothetically you only manage to score 3 A's and 1 B. This is a very good scenario for you because the B would now convert to a H1 and it won't count into your overall score. Meanwhile, your 3 A's will remain as your 3 H2. So what that gives you is a lot more leeway and a safety net just in case you fail to hit the target that you have. Because if you straight away decide to go into 3 H2 and 1 H1 and you completely ignore your H1, you're in a way banking all of your stock on the 3 H2s. And you really have to do well for those 3 because if you didn't do well for any of them, it will directly greatly impact your overall score. But having a bit of diversification by having 4 H2s could be a good plan as well. This is also the same dilemma in secondary school, whether to take more subjects or less. So it's really dependent on your, firstly, interest in the subject, and your bandwidth of whether you're able to hang on to as many as possible. More options are always good, but only if it suits your situation. So I think same as Xin Wei, I would say to try first.
Yeah.
And the moment you realize that, okay, it might be better since I'm not able to cope, to drop to H1. If your school even offers that, I'll suggest that you go ahead with the option first. And I think what this will also mean is that there will be a lot more emphasis on your H2 subjects, given that now it makes up 60 out of 70 points of your rank point. So in the past, you can still pull up your grades a little by PW or via your H1, but now it's pretty much if you screw up your H2, that's it. So Xin Wei, what kind of changes do you think you will observe given that now there's a lot more emphasis on the H2 subjects?
I think it's choosing wisely which tree to focus on. And I think so just now Darrell said that mainly people will do like H1 econs, right? Actually, it really depends, because bio also a lot of people will drop to H1 because of how memory intensive it is, and dropping to H1 means that can memorize less stuff. And so I think it's really for students to identify their strength, like really must capitalize on their strength. Like what Darrell said, now the H2 is making up like most of your university admission score. And you really must capitalize on your strength and then minimize the weakness. So and that will differ students to students, because some students just cannot get econs because it's very new, or some students just think that bio is just simply too memory intensive. Dropping to H1 can save a bit of their time, and they need that time to focus on other subjects. So yeah.
I think one point that I'd like to add is that for those of you who have a rough idea of which university courses you're aiming for, I know most of us don't, but if you have a slight inclination towards like a certain sector or a certain type of university course, I think what would be wise is actually for you to just go onto the university website, go and check for the course enrollment. There might be certain courses that would require certain subjects, and that could influence your decision on which H2 to be taking. So for specific engineering courses, they actually require you to take H2 math or H2 chemistry and things like that. So I think it's very important for you to make sure that you are on the right track, heading towards where you want to head towards, because a lot of students take based on what they are good at. While that is largely the main consideration, you also want to factor in if there is already a course that you have decided on. It might just be a smarter choice to go ahead with the one that will help you gain as much options as possible when you enter university.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last major change would probably be linking to the removal of mid-year exams. So what are your thoughts on that?
I feel like if listeners have listened before, like when they remove primary school and secondary school, Darrell and I have already talked about this removing of mid-year exams, and we were both like not a fan of it, because it is such an important checkpoint, be it early sign or early warning, but I can't believe they just like get rid of the opportunity for students to test themselves. Okay, the argument is that they want to remove the stakes, remove the stress, but it doesn't remove it. It simply delay it, and that is not helping anything. I feel like I simply cannot see the benefit of this. Yeah.
I totally agree. I feel like this move is made with a little bit too top-down perspective, because I think to the upper management, they are making decisions like that. They will see having more exams as more stress. But I think what doesn't change is the fact that if there is going to be a national exam that would dictate your choice to your next education path, like from O-level, your O-level score would dictate whether you go to JC, Poly, or ITE, and your A-level score affecting your university admission choices, that final roadblock, that final test is not removed. Until that actual barrier is removed, people are going to be feeling stressed. Yeah. So the J1s, right, I know, like, or J2s, or maybe Sec 3, Sec 4s, they might feel stressed in the moment for their mid-year exam that used to be there and now it's gone, but it doesn't remove the ultimate stress of O-level. So I find that removing mid-year exam is just a very placatory steps to move towards the direction they're looking for, but I think it fundamentally doesn't change much. Now, if anything, I want to just have a more balanced viewpoint. I do view it as potentially a good thing in primary school, and maybe to a certain extent, Sec 1, Sec 2, Sec 3. I think can argue to a certain extent. But I feel like if you're in your national exam year, to wait for your first major exam up to prelim, which is a few months away from your O-level, A-level, is way too risky of a proposition. Like, I'm not a big fan of that, because personally for me, having a mid-year exam was one of the most important wake-up calls for myself. Like, I'm actually not doing well. Like, when I sat for the paper, actual exam condition, I realized I wasn't as well prepared as I thought, and I could use June holiday to really do majority of the catching up. To me, that was one of my key turning points. But with that being removed now, I feel like students are slightly deprived of the chance to test themselves.
Yeah.
Because I know exams sound scary and it comes with a certain level of stress, but honestly, I always tell my students, all of your WAs and tests, they are just sort of like a periodic check to see whether you're keeping up to pace or not. The only exam that truly matters is honestly your O-levels and A-levels, right? But now we're removing more of this tests, which means you're placing even more stress towards the end. It's a bit like delaying the pain, like Xin Wei said. So personally, not the biggest fan, but we'll see how it works. So internally, for our own Overmark team, we're already making plans to conduct mock mid-year exams for our students. Based on our current schedule, it will most likely be in June, during June holidays. We will also try to open this up to the public. So for those of you who are keen to just sit for a mock mid-year exam, it will be available to you, and our tutors will even go through the papers afterwards and review some of the key learning points, the most common mistakes. So do keep a lookout for it if that interests you. We might have more down the line before prelim and O-level as well. But we'll see how the first session goes. Xin Wei, maybe just to wrap up this episode, any general thoughts on the whole changes, the direction the education system is moving towards?
Just one like, maybe not something that we have touched on, but actually this move potentially about removing that fourth subject is that it could encourage students to take a subject that may not be very good for exam, but they are interested in. Like for example, actually for A-level and O-level, I think some humanities subject has been seeing like a great decline in people taking them, like literature, because I guess it's just not a very popular subject. Maybe people avoid it due to exam, like it being hard as well. But removing that, maybe students could chase like a subject that they like instead of something that is more suitable for exam. So if that's the perspective, and I think that could benefit maybe not a big group of students, but if it can benefit some students, and I think that's not a bad thing as well.
For sure, I'm of that opinion as well. I think that the opening up of the H1 subject now to be excluded from your university admission score would mean that you have the choice to pursue something you're actually interested in. So, I mean, overall, the changes, I think is definitely a step in the right direction. I think there's no denying. It's just that it's a little bit counterproductive with the removal of mock mid-year exam. I feel like if there was a bit more on the ground feeling out, I think a lot of students will actually say they feel stressed about the exam, but ultimately they do appreciate having a chance to check, especially in their national exam year. So if there's any like thing that I wish could have been changed, I think removal of mid-year exams work, but maybe not for students in their national exam year. Sec 4s and J2s, I feel like those two are like must have, but I don't know lah. I mean, like we are just like who are we, right, to say anything?
No, I tell all my students before June holidays, they better revise like all the Sec 3 chapters. Like I tell them like they need to, like even for their other subjects that I'm not their tutor, right? I tell them like, even so bio they for sure will revise, because I mean they are with me, right? But even for other subjects, I tell them that they must find time to do something about it. They can't possibly leave it until like July or
it's
August.
too late.
It's just too late.
So the mock mid-year exams, there's a very strong incentive for us to go ahead with it. So it will most likely happen. But for those of our listeners who are keen to join, we will, as usual, make the announcement on Telegram or Instagram. So do keep a lookout for it. But as we come to the end of today's episode, we hope that you enjoyed the chat that we had today about the changes to A levels. If you're watching this on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe for more episodes in the future. If you are listening to us on Spotify, do give us a follow as well. And we'll see all of you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
It sound right, boy.